1509. England celebrated its new king. No one knew he would change the nation forever. Handsome, powerful, charismatic, Henry VIII was the prince everyone admired. But one obsession would drag England into blood, betrayal, and religious conflict. This is the story of the king who changed England forever. In 1491, Henry was the second son of the Tudor Dynasty. The throne was never meant for him. His older brother Arthur was raised to become king. Henry was prepared for a life in the church. Then, everything changed in 1502. Prince Arthur died suddenly. Overnight, Henry was no longer an overlooked prince. He had become England's future king. 1509, at just 17 years old, Henry ascended the throne. England welcomed its new king with celebration. Tall, athletic, a musician, poet, and skilled warrior, Henry embodied the ideal Renaissance king. Across Europe, royal courts admired England's young king. Many believed a great ruler had arrived. But a king's destiny was shaped by more than his crown. The marriage he was about to make would change England forever. Spain's powerful princess, Catherine of Aragon, arrived in England to forge a great royal alliance. Catherine married Prince Arthur, the heir to the English throne. She was expected to become England's future queen. But their happiness did not last. Only a few months later, Arthur died unexpectedly. The new King Henry chose to preserve the alliance and made the decision that would change his destiny. He married Catherine of Aragon. During the early years, Henry and Catherine shared a happy marriage. England eagerly awaited an heir. But hope slowly faded away. Miscarriages, stillbirths, and infants who lived only briefly shattered the royal family. Only one child survived, Princess Mary. But for Henry, a daughter was not enough. Henry believed, without a male heir, the Tudor dynasty would collapse, and England could fall into civil war once again. Then, a remarkable young woman appeared at court. Her name was Anne Boleyn. Anne was no ordinary woman. Educated at the French court, she was intelligent, cultured, and impossible to ignore. Henry was captivated by Anne, but Anne refused to become the king's mistress. Anne had only one condition. If Henry wanted her, she would not be his mistress. She would be Queen of England. Henry wanted only one thing: the Pope to declare his marriage invalid. Only then could he marry Anne Boleyn. But the Pope refused his request. Catherine of Aragon was the aunt of Emperor Charles V. Years of waiting turned Henry's frustration into anger. He became convinced that God had cursed his marriage. The Pope would not change his decision. Henry was about to make a choice that would reshape Europe forever. 1533. Henry would wait no longer. He rejected the Pope's authority. The Archbishop of Canterbury declared Henry's marriage to Catherine invalid. The final obstacle was gone. Henry declared himself supreme head of the Church of England. Rome's authority over England had come to an end. A decision made for one marriage reshaped not only England, but the religious and political future of all Europe. In 1533, Henry secretly married Anne Boleyn. She had become England's new queen. Anne was crowned in a magnificent ceremony. Henry believed his dream had finally come true. But the long-awaited son never came. Anne gave birth to a daughter, Princess Elizabeth. Henry did not lose hope, but as time passed, this marriage, like the first, began to fall into the same dead end. Months passed. Anne became pregnant once again, but she lost the baby. Henry's love slowly turned into anger. He now believed Anne would never give him a male heir. Soon after, terrible accusations were brought against Anne: treason, adultery, even plotting against the king. The woman, for whom England had broken with Rome, was now being led to the Tower of London. Anne Boleyn stood trial for treason, adultery, and incest. The evidence was weak, but the verdict had already been decided. On May 19, 1536, Anne Boleyn was executed. The Queen of England had become history. Just 11 days later, Henry married again. His new queen was Jane Seymour. For Henry, the past was already behind him, but one goal had never changed: to produce a male heir. 1537. All of England held its breath. The moment everyone had waited for had finally arrived. After 2 long days of labor, Jane Seymour gave birth to a son. With the birth of Prince Edward, Henry had finally achieved his dream. The future of the Tudor dynasty seemed secure. But this victory came at a terrible cost. Only days after giving birth, Jane Seymour passed away. Henry decided to marry again. This time, he chose his bride from a portrait. But when Henry finally met Anne of Cleves, he was deeply disappointed. The marriage lasted only 6 months. Soon after, Henry married the young Catherine Howard, but that marriage too ended with accusations of betrayal. His final wife was Catherine Parr. During his last years, she became Henry's greatest companion. Years had passed. The once young and powerful king was now battling illness. During his lifetime, he had married 6 times. 2 wives were executed, and 2 marriages ended in separation. On January 28, 1547, Henry VIII passed away. He left behind a divided nation and a transformed world. But Henry's true legacy was not only his son. The future of England would be written by his children. When Henry VIII died, he left behind 3 heirs: Edward, Mary, and Elizabeth. First, the young Edward VI became king. He quickly pushed England toward Protestant reform. After Edward's death, Mary Tudor became queen. She restored Catholicism as England's official faith. But the greatest ruler of the Tudor dynasty had not yet taken the throne. Her name was Elizabeth. Henry's reforms changed more than the royal court. They transformed monasteries and churches across England. Hundreds of monasteries were closed. Their lands and wealth passed into the hands of the crown. These decisions strengthened the royal treasury and helped create a new English nobility. Henry's goal was simply to have a son, but without realizing it, he had built a New England. Henry's decisions did not change England alone. They reshaped the balance of power across Europe. Kings, emperors, and even the Pope now viewed England very differently. Henry's actions laid the foundation for England's rise as one of Europe's greatest powers. But Henry's greatest legacy had not yet taken the throne. Her name was Elizabeth. Henry VIII was gone, but his decisions lived on. England would never be the same again. The ties with Rome had been broken. England now had its own church and its own path. Soon, Henry's youngest daughter would transform England into one of the world's greatest kingdoms. In the next episode, we'll witness the struggle for the throne between Mary I and Elizabeth I. Subscribe for the next chapter of England's history.